probably push the button in. Is this on now? Yes, it is. Now, where's my notes? I should turn it off while I'm remembering to myself. Where in the order should I put things? In first position, in last position?
Well, it's good if I introduce the workshop first.
Oh, no. You're introducing that. Then I can put them in alphabetical order like others, or alphabetical order. Wait. Okay. Good morning. It is still morning, and it's time to start. In fact, it's already a couple minutes past starting. So what this is the Dynamic Coalition on the Internet of Things. The schedule today is fairly full, and so I wanted to get started. The first thing, and let me just give you a recap of the agenda since it has changed a little since it was last put out. In the first place, we'll be having a discussion of what's being called the Minds and Treasures. Over the last year, the Dynamic Coalition has met at least once. There's been a lot of online discussions. A paper was developed that is available online. And today we have a bunch of really quite distinguished speakers to basically speak about various aspects of things that had been referred to in that paper and perhaps some other issues that were important. Then, because this is a dynamic coalition, as opposed to a workshop, we'll then basically talk a little bit about the action plan for next year, because as a dynamic coalition, we don't just meet once a year, but basically excuse me, we try to work through the year producing something like the paper that was produced this year at various other conferences. So we want to talk a little bit about the action plan. So be thinking yourselves if there are things that you think that we should be doing, or meetings that we think should be brought into all this, or other groups that should be brought into all of this effort. So please let us know. That'll be at the end. We'll also be picking a new chair. Hopefully we'll be sort of accepting a new chair, and Martin has indicated a willingness. I've been doing it for 2 years. It's time that we get someone more active and more, energized. I'm not very energized these days, You can tell my low level of energy at the moment. So, without boring you further, and that's basically our agenda. I don't know, it's a dynamic coalition. Does anyone think the agenda should change? No. Fantastic. Okay, so then in which case I'd like to turn the floor over to Martin, who will basically give a little bit of a talk on the paper that's been produced and sort of introduce this session, and then I'll basically be introducing our speakers as I call them to speak, as opposed to doing a thing. And Martin, if you want to give a little bit about yourself, other than that you're chair of the board of PIR, then please do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Avery, and thank you for inspirational leadership from you, from Wolfgang Kleinwachter, from Sandra and others, to help continue making this happen. As said, a dynamic coalition is really to move from A to B, not to just talk with each other when we're in yet another IGF. Talking about the subjects during the European IGF, Eurodic in Berlin, it became very clear that there are so many aspects that are relevant because of the things on the internet. It's not a different internet, it's not one network. Like the internet, it's a network of networks. Yet, with things, new things become possible and need to become possible. So the Internet of Things as such is a good focus on some of the specific governance issues that we are to face. And in that, we recognize there's a lot of treasures to be discovered, to be uncovered, to be accessed by making better use of the potential that all the concepts behind the Internet of Things bring. At the same time, we're aware it's a minefield, a potential minefield as well, in several aspects. So hence the title, Treasures and Mines, for mapping the treasures and mines for Internet of Things. The second reason to just make a map rather than tell you how to deal with it is because it's a global thing here. And in different parts of the globe, and there's different stakeholders, you may want to do different things with it. Yet it's important for all to recognize what those potential treasures and mines would be. So what we distinguished is a couple of subjects that you've heard come back earlier and also this morning at the 9 o'clock workshop that was hosted by OECD on this subject. But first, there is privacy. It's a conscious dealing with data collection and access. It's security. It's where data access is important, but also, of course, tempering of data, tempering of actuators that are part of this new network of things. With all what we do, it's so important and it's often forgotten on, for sure, the business agenda, sometimes even on the political agenda until it becomes very salient, and that's ethics. And for ethics, an Internet of Things to be ethical, it requires that people know what it's about. It requires informed people, and it requires listening to people. This is also a business issue on the long term. Also in Berlin, Eric was pushed upon him by the court because he recognizes very much that the right to be forgotten is something people want. Another aspect which is more technical, maybe not obvious, but that's spectrum. Today, spectrum is not a problem for Internet of Things, and maybe tomorrow not either, but at some point, with the enormous masses, are we ready, or do we need to be conscious already today of how we develop these networks to avoid ending up in a dead alley there? Now, these are more or less the governance issues identified. Standardization, identifiers, important subjects, but not that much on an internet governance level. These are happening. So, having said that, obviously the aspect there is the lock-in that you want to avoid, but other than that, these things happen in new ways, develop in new ways. So the panel people here that we actually don't call a panel but committed contributors are those people who've been thinking about these subjects, and invitation is really to come from their perspective what they think is key in moving forward with this agenda and make sure we can grab the benefits and avoid ending up in dead valleys, dead ends by doing this on a global level. Afri?
Okay, thank you. So our first speaker is of committed contributors, and I sit corrected, thank you. I'll actually even stand corrected, is Dr. Hussein Badran, Director of Special Projects at QCRI. So please, and I'm asking folks to limit to 5 minutes, and I'll hold up 4 fingers when it looks like you're at close to 5 minutes. Thank you. Dr. Hussein.
Yes. Good morning. It's a real pleasure to be here and to be such a member of such a distinguished panel. Quite humbled to be on this panel. I'm trying to bring the point of view of emerging economies to the usage of IoT and machine-to-machine communication. I am based in the Middle East, originally from Egypt, currently living in Dubai. I've been with Cisco was with Cisco for 14 years, left as a distinguished system architect. So in emerging economies, emerging markets, IoT and machine-to-machine communication has a real potential not only to improve the life of citizens, but actually to be a vehicle to remove very serious economic challenges to well-identified economic sectors, having to do with food production and food distribution, having to do with irrigation, having to do with usage of oil. Perhaps some of you may know, most of us wouldn't know, that in some countries, government is obliged to subsidize gas gas consumption by vehicles, by cars, to its citizens. Some countries import the liter of gas by $1 and sell it to its citizens by 1/10 of the price. The rest is government subsidy. So basically, the tens of millions and hundreds of millions of Egyptian pounds or tens of millions of billions of dollars are spent every year in an increasing fashion year over year to subsidize oil consumption, food imports, and similar activities. Through the use of IoT and machine-to-machine communication, we can optimize the usage and distribution of goods such as gas. And we have seen through some experiments that perhaps 60% of this subsidy can be availed through use of technology. So we can utilize machine-to-machine communication, sensor-based networks, smart cards, to improve the economic situation desperately needed in emerging economies. Another example is the water consumption and irrigation. Some countries, again, using Egypt as an example, the Nile is the main source of water, and now the Nile is threatened by new dams being built down the stream in Africa. So using irrigation in a very smart and efficient way is very important to the livelihood of citizens, of millions of inhabitants of Egypt and Sudan and the rest of the continent. So it's very important then to utilize this kind of technology to better the life of citizens and the economic situation in particular. If we talk about mines, we have some examples of utilizing IoT in sectors like intelligent traffic management in Doha, for example. Here, this is an example where a company is building antennas on the road and then collecting traffic data from cars and vehicles and these antennas. This data really has no legal framework of collection and distribution and access. So the issue of privacy, usage of data is an issue that is not on the agenda yet, unfortunately, but it requires a legal framework to put in place to protect the usage of such data. And there are examples, as I mentioned, in our region where small companies, there's a need for small companies filling the vacuum and building applications that consumers use and getting to know and feel the benefit of using. So the legal framework is an important aspect. A treasure that I can mention is the area of innovation. Innovation is very similar, giving parallel to applications on smartphones. Applications on IoT and machine-to-machine communication utilizing embedded systems is an area that does not require a huge capital for investment in order to produce these applications. It does not necessarily require a huge company to build such applications. And so this opportunity for emerging economies, emerging countries, to utilize this sector of machine-to-machine communication to develop applications that target, again, the real need of these economies with a small capital for investment, but have opportunity to innovate and utilize employment opportunities and research opportunities in these economies. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have Dan Caprio on the remote to speak? He was one of our remote participants that was going to speak, and I wanted to check if he was there. No, he's not. In which case, Vint, you come next in the alphabetical order I'm following. Vint is well known as the evangelist for the internet at Google and for so many other things. Please, Vint.
Thank you very much. Let me start out by suggesting that the policy side of this has to reflect on what properties we want this Internet of Things to exhibit. So the policy question is, what kinds of common properties should we want in this machine-to-machine environment? I'm just going to mention some really hard problems which in my view have not been solved and which have to be solved to make this a safe and useful kind of innovation. One of them is figuring out how to configure large numbers of devices, both fixed and mobile. Well, here's what I'm worried about. You bring something home and it needs to be configured as part of your home system, and you put it into configuration mode, and the next thing you know, you accidentally start controlling your neighbor's equipment. We have to have strong access control mechanisms to confine the controls of these machine devices. The second thing is that we need some standards standards, and I think IP version 6 is going to play a big role in this simply because of its large address space. But the standards do something else. They create the kind of opportunity that you were mentioning. Once you create standards, then third parties can offer to manage your devices for you. So whether it's your entertainment devices or your security systems or heating and ventilation and air conditioning, a third party can intervene to manage and monitor those systems on your behalf, which creates new jobs and new businesses. There is an example of an organization that, if you don't know, might be of interest. It's called the IPSO, for Internet Protocol Smart Objects. And it's having meetings over the course of the year to bring people together who are interested in building devices that have this property that they can communicate with each other and that can be controlled and monitored. Google, as you know, has acquired a company called Nest, which makes devices like this for fire detection and heating and ventilation and air conditioning. One other scary aspect of all this, as time goes on, it will be impossible to buy a stupid processor. So sometimes you think of this Internet of Things as simple little devices with not very much horsepower. Your refrigerator is going to have the ability to run a full-up Linux operating system. Now, it may not use that power to do very much, but what if somebody infects the refrigerator with a virus and uses all the power of that processor to do some some harmful thing? I'm worried about the headline that says Bank of America attacked by 100 million refrigerators around the world. And although, of course, that's intended to be funny, it's actually a serious potential hazard. You mentioned a little bit about available spectrum, and I'm going to argue that, as the last point, that we have not used the existing spectrum very well. In fact, with the arrival of more processing power and multiple radios, we should be able to cohabit in the frequency spectrums already available far more efficiently than we have before. And as we move up into the higher frequencies, 85 gigahertz or so, you can build multimodal antennas, MIMO antennas, that will direct energy to use the spectrum more efficiently, and will also be able to beamform to listen more efficiently. So we've just barely begun to design and build systems that take advantage of processing power to use our available resources more effectively.
Thank you. The next speaker is Narelle Clark, who's Deputy of Operations and is Director of Operations and Deputy CEO of Australian Communications Consumer Action Network. Please.
Thanks, Avery. And I also, for my sins, spent a bit of time on the ISOC board, but I'm not speaking in that capacity today. So I want to try and put it more of the consumer perspective here, and I have certainly heard it from my colleagues. And I will also agree with Vint that I think spectrum is both a scarce resource and an inefficiently used resource. There is boundless amounts of spectrum, really, if you use it efficiently, but we certainly haven't used it efficiently in time. And certainly, I can see a world where there is the potential for all of my devices to offer up a bit of spectrum to share and mediate the passage of data from here to there. But at this stage, I don't think we're anywhere near that sort of level of ad hoc networking and cooperative relay networking that I can see in the future, where a consumer would have control over what bandwidth they seed and what services they offer up and what they receive. But again, we're a long way off from that. So what I wanted to do was to try and come back to what I see as very important, and that is what we call the 8 consumer rights, the basic rights. And these have not really worked into this technology at this stage. And I think that is mainly because it is such an evolving area. A number of us who've been happily connected to the internet for a good 20 years now have seen this sort of thing coming, but it has only been recently that we have had these sorts of devices like smart TVs where people, and personal gadgets that mean people are happy to adopt this stuff and are embracing it with a gusto that we really haven't seen up until now. So if I get onto these, the consumer rights, so the first one is the right to satisfaction of basic needs. And I can see pros and cons coming from the Internet of Things, where the Internet of Things enables the basic needs of food, clothing, shelter, healthcare, those sorts of things. It can play a large part in delivering those important things to us. By the same token, they can also allow or prevent us from getting access to these sorts of things. So the next one is the right to redress. And that is where consumers receive fair settlement of just claims, including compensation for misrepresentation, shoddy goods or unsatisfactory services. At this stage in the evolution of the Internet of Things, I would say that there are an awful lot of shoddy goods out there. And we are not, as consumers, getting appropriate recompense or redress for these sorts of shoddy devices. And the area where I would consider them to be the most shoddy would, of course, be security. And I don't think I'll get any complaints or disagreements there. We're not able to control or appropriately apply levels of security, and I don't think we're getting the level of redress when our security is breached and our privacy is lost, invaded, and so forth. The right to consumer education. Well, I think that one's missing also. That's not being met at all in the area of the Internet of Things. The level of consumer information that is provided with the smart TVs that I've assessed is very, very low. In devices like wearable computers and so forth, the level of consumer information available there is really not sufficient to my mind either. The right to a healthy environment, well, that is one in which I think we can see a great deal of promise coming from the Internet of Things. If you'll excuse me, I need to just... Okay, the right to safety. Well, if I get back to shoddy goods, the area of the right to safety with these sorts of devices is arguable in some ways and less arguable in others. Given... If we to think about devices with very little computing capacity and very little feature capacity, there is the possibility that they will interact inappropriately with electrical sources, and therefore cause short-outs, brownouts, etc. So that's an area I think that could be informed. I think I've also mentioned the right to be informed, the right to choose. Well, at the moment, I think there is an improvement in the level of choice that is available, but again, with it being such an evolving area, there is very little by which we can compare one item with another. So it is difficult there to say that we are yet at a stable point where we can make a fair assessment. And the right to be heard, the right for consumers to voice complaints and concerns about products. Well, if we are in an area where there is very little in the way of standards, then how is there a place to complain? How can there be a place to complain? Who do I talk to when it breaks? I mean, there is my original supplier, yes, but in the most cases we've got to a point where it is a disposable environment. These devices, if they don't work, you get them and throw them away, which means we are living in this ever increasing pile of garbage. So I think I'll leave that at that point, and before I get the single finger from Avery.
I wouldn't do that. Okay, thank you very much. So the next speaker I have is Hiroshi Esaki, Professor, University of Tokyo. Please, the floor is yours.
Okay, this is Hiroshi Esaki from Japan. I'm working for the JP Vice President. JP for the Vice President. I mean, important thing you already covered about security. The ID is also very important because we're working around IP address as a ICT internet infrastructure. When we're talking about IoT, we have another very different stakeholder, say HVAC or sensors people. They don't like TCP/IP basically. though we have to connect them. So we have to have unique ID in order to welcome them to the shared infrastructure. That is one of the points I think, very important thing. I'm also belonging to the WIDE project. That is the old project we are working around. Regarding IoT, we started to work around 2000, I think. My colleague Jim Murray first connected every single vehicle. Then what's going to be can do? Then I started work around 2000 about smart building business. Then a lot of unlikely people who working around HVACs or lights, they didn't use TCP/IP at the moment of time, though they are coming to us. Then that is the I'm trying to making an ecosystem that is basically designed the internet architecture. That's I really learned from Vint and Bob when you came to Japan Award. The essential design of the internet is one shared asset for multiple purposes, and also doesn't expect any use of how use the infrastructure. So that is an important thing, how we accommodate, if we allow unexpected use of the system or data. That is one of the challenges we have to think about in the case of the IoT. Also, I always think about ecosystem regarding the smart city or smart building system. I start to work from the business point of view, energy saving. That is not a good business, though in parallel, the single infrastructure be able to contribute to the BCP, business continuation plan, by the energy saving control of the equipment. The other one is improvement of productivity and efficiency. That is a direct influence to the business budget. The last one is a new business. In order to introduce new business, we have to make a consensus the different use of the infrastructure from the original design and implementation. For example, I'm working around LED lights first, just simply because of the energy saving. Though afterward, LED lights be able to work as an access point for the communication, visual light communication. Already 100 meg bit per second is available for the LED lights communication. Yet another interesting use is the LED is a very accurate location detector. The LED lights could be kind of crazy GPS satellite. 10 centimeter or 20 centimeter accuracy of the positioning we can have, which means originally LED was energy saving. The once we connect them to the network with digital network, a lot of the other purpose or a lot of application we can introduce. In the case of my building, I try to introduce a TCP/IP for every single equipment or devices. Then 30% energy cut in total, 40% peak cut we made with a 2-year return of investment. That is quite important, right? We have to show them the economy as well as the opportunity, what we could do using the practical testbed, the practical system. We designed this as a base of the data-centric network that has been standardized as the IEEE 8088. Data is a centralized, shared data repository. Then every single equipment send the data to the data repository, then any single user or application be able to access the data repository. That is the design of the My Smart Building or My Smart Campuses. That is, I try to avoiding the fragmentation of the networks. When I talk with the building industry, that is very fragmented, isolated network. Because of the isolated, no security they think about. That's a story, right? So I always say to them, welcome to the shared infrastructure. Then we are going to make a new application, a new ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And my next speaker is Ram Mohan, Executive Vice President and Chief Technology Officer of Affiliate. Sometimes you know a name and you say it easily, and then you try to read it and you stumble over it. So please, Ram.
very much, and thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this dynamic coalition. Clearly, we all understand the promise of the Internet of Things: greater operational efficiencies, reduced risk potentially through better data and analysis, and of course, totally new business models. But I wanted to focus my comments on some of the implications of the physical world that becomes an immense 24/7 channel for data. Clearly, at the Internet of Things, connectivity is a big part of it, and anything that can be connected can be exploited. And so I think we are looking at a new security landscape that is going to emerge. Vint talked about configurability of devices. I think that's an important thing. There's another consideration. How do you update software on devices that have been installed by the billions? What do you do about embedded systems? You have processors that are that have software embedded in them. It's not just the application-oriented pieces, but when those pieces of software, embedded systems, have vulnerabilities, what is the solution? A wholesale completely throwing it all away doesn't really appear to be a feasible idea. Third thing that I wanted to talk about, to mention, is interoperability. We currently are in a fragmented and a specialized environment when you look at the Internet of Things. Now, you hear a call for standardization that will potentially, down the road, get us to common APIs, application programming interfaces, that allow these objects to talk to each other. I pose to you that doing that now creates a new set of vectors for coordinated attacks. And that again changes the way you look at security, the way you look at managing these devices. One other thing, let's say you do have this world with these interconnected devices and objects, and you have standardization, and you have some methods of addressing attacks, massive attacks that get launched. The current mitigation models for attacks, those models are desperately in need of update. Today, if you look at massive attacks, a very common approach is to shut down the source of the attacks. In the Internet of Things, that could easily result in your home alarm system being rendered inoperable, or your thermostat disconnected from the entire home.
Or your insulin pump.
Right, or your insulin pump, for that matter. Right. So I think the mitigation model for attacks has to be rethought and significantly changed. At the enterprise level, when you're an organization or an enterprise that is focusing on the Internet of Things and thinking about what to do with it, I think most enterprises today are focused on the data element. They're dealing with volume, velocity, and structure of the data that is coming in. In other words, tremendously high volume, but it's reasonably steady volume. It's not, often big peaks, but it's pretty steady volume of data coming in. But the velocity is increasing over time. The structure of the data is not very good right now. It's quite unstructured data, and I think most enterprises and the managers at enterprises are thinking about, are simply at the first generation of thinking about what to do with this data. But there are three things there. There's data storage, there's data analysis, and then there is data protection, right? And all three of them bear significant effort and thought, because data coming in an unstructured manner has to be stored and analyzed, but it feels to me like with billions of devices, with lots of data coming in, the concept of centralized data storage is going to go away. Where we have to start to think about distributed data storage. The moment you start to think about distributed data storage, then you have to think about data governance. What do you do about network bandwidth? What do you do about remote storage bandwidth, as well as the capacity to store raw data? 2020, Gartner estimates there are going to be 26 billion units that will be connected. We have many things to think about on how to actually make all of this interoperate and be secure.
Thank you. Next is Rolf Weber, Professor, University of Zurich, Faculty of Law. So please, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm of course pleased to add a few words to the distinguished comments of my fellow panelists. Let me start, after many things have already been addressed, with the general remark that new technologies and new business models always cause a certain call for new legal rules and regulation. And just to go back to the history of the internet, the famous Declaration of Independence issued by John Perry Barlow in 1996, saying that we don't need legal norms for cyberspace, has turned out to be a complete illusion. Now, I'm not saying that law is the most important discipline. Law cannot cause development. Law cannot invent new business models, but law should be considered as a serving discipline, and eventually law can prevent that technology and new business models are going into a wrong direction. And on this premises, I would like to look a little bit back to the last 3-4 years and alert at least those who are not familiar with that, to the fact that the European Commission has established an expert group some 3-4 years ago. The experts were asked to study different elements and different problems in relation to the Internet of Things. At that time, there was quite a strong rejection of these efforts expressed by the officials of the United States. And after 2 years of work, the expert group has, in fact, produced a certain report, but the Commission decided not to follow up. And somehow, surprisingly enough, all of a sudden, now the Department of Trade of the United States is starting to dig into the related problems. So this also shows that maybe the Commission, EU Commission, was slightly on the wrong track, because the Commission put much emphasis on governance issues, questions: should we invent ICANN 2 for the Internet of Things, which does not seem the appropriate way to go forward. However, basic problems have to be tackled, and most of these basic problems have already been addressed by my fellow panelists. I think foremost, we will be confronted with many new challenges in the field of data protection and in the field of security. Somehow data exchange between machines does not mean that we do not have personal data at stake. And obviously, if you look at data protection, we have the problem that we do not have a harmonized set of data protection rules, and this would probably require business to do own efforts with binding corporate rules, etc., in order to see to it that, in particular, cross-border data transfer does not cause further problems. Then we have security. This has been addressed. We have human rights involved. Corporate social responsibility might be a buzzword in this context. I'm not going into the aspect of consumer rights, because this has already been nicely addressed. We have interoperability. We have the question of standardization. Of course, standardization makes sense, but if we have only one global standard, we might be confronted with antitrust problems, monopolization. So there's a lot to do in the legal fields, and I can only invite community not to forget about this serving discipline.
Thank you. Okay, Next, I have Kuwei Wu, who is National Information Infrastructure Enterprise Promotion Association, the CEO, and is also a member of the ICANN Board of Directors. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I think that is my advantage because since everybody already, lay out all the scenarios, so I try to bring a little bit difference to what is the previous speaker is saying. As you know, I actually from Taiwan, and Taiwan is a very important OEM site for all the ICT device, any kind of ICT device, from the PC, notebook, flat panel, up to even the chips. So, from my experience, as I know in Taiwan, also in the Asia, I think the people began to talking about the IoT is a start from, I think it's almost 1996, 97 until now. And from the very beginning, I think one of the very hard issue is talking about RFID, and now the people move to the IPv6 and then Bluetooth, many different kind of the technology. And I'd like to particularly point out one thing for all of you is remember, because most of the manufacturing is in Taiwan, and the design is outside of the Taiwan. And to be honest, in my experience, for example, the access point, the Wi-Fi access point, almost 89% of the access device is manufactured by a Taiwanese company. Okay. And the problem is the interface between the designer and the manufacturer, to be honest, sometimes is missing. So for example, the Cisco design or Google design, and you send it out to the manufacturing, if you are, it go to the very tedious stuff. You have to describe clear enough, or the manufacturing engineer will based on what he understands to implement it for you. And that is always be forgot. If I remember back to year 2000, John Hansen actually told me one thing. He said, is it possible to allow the IETF Wi-Fi access device designer go to Taiwan to talk to the manufacturer engineer? Because if you remember in the early days, the Wi-Fi in the big conference, you actually conflict. Yeah. And it can be resolved by manufacturing. And this is always be forgot. So I think this is one thing when we are talking about the IoT, we are not only talking about on the policy level, internet governance level, design level. Don't forget, the manufacturer level, you must have a very good communications. The second thing regarding for the internet governance, particularly in IoT, is another issue, particularly for the RFID. I think many people know that RFID also runs similar DNS systems. And a lot of people don't know who run that. Who run the root server for the DNS, for the RFID? And is there in our policy oversight, or anybody look at that issue? And well, I think Vin, you know who run the root server, And what we going to govern in this part? Okay, so finally, I think I'd like to say is for the IoT, since that is the smart device is getting close to the personal data, even the medical health data, whatever, I think it's very important to lay out the difference between this data is mine, anybody cannot touch, or the device provider, and then go to the outside of the internet. So it's a three different circles we need to clear cut. Which part is mine? Without me, even the provider cannot touch that. And that have to be defined well. Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to just check before I move to participants in the room whether there is no, okay, thank you. I've learned a lot just listening to the scope of what went on and the range. We've got about 20 minutes now where I'd like to get, whether it's questions or contributions, and I'll come with the microphone and I'll try to do it. Is there more than one microphone? Yes, please.
Would you allow a little bit of interaction among the panelists as a consequence of what we heard from the others?
This is from an early speaking panelist.
Sure, but I'd also like to get, how about we get some of the room participants in,
I
and
want to
then,
get in the queue.
Okay, I gotcha. Okay, thanks. So I saw a couple hands. I saw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 hands. I saw 7 hands. Wow. Okay, but your hand is 8 hands. Okay. Okay, and thank you for telling me this first. Please keep short. You know there's a lot of people. Right, okay.
Rudolf Vandenberg, OECD. I first want to mention that I'm really happy to hear the consumer issues being discussed. At the OECD, we have a Consumer Policy Commission, and they are going to write a thing on consumer policy and the Internet of Things for our upcoming Digital Economy Outlook, which will have a whole chapter on the Internet of Things. Second of all, one element that I missed that's being mentioned now by some OECD countries is the trade issues involved, because we now have such a fragmented market. Several countries who are on the producing side, and well, Taiwan is not a member, so we don't talk to them that much, but there are other members who manufacture a lot of stuff. They are very worried that they will be making equipment that they cannot actually sell globally because there are no global uniform harmonized standards, or at least the idea of a kind of harmonized system that you can work from. And that is something I think we will see a lot of work on in the coming years, to get a kind of harmonized framework that at least works across the 34 OECD countries, but hopefully, of course, across the world.
Thank you. Please, next. And you kept it below 2 minutes. And thank you. I think right behind you is next. And I ask everyone to try and do that. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Peter Dangate Thrush. I'm a recovering lawyer, and I mention that because I'm going to ask a technical question. So I want answers that in very simple language. And the question is about the role of the domain name system in the IoT. The system, the DNS, is set up to look for and find domain names, but do you see the IoT as disintermediating that? We obviously, machine-to-machine communication obviously doesn't need a .com English readable, human-readable system in the middle. Or are we going to see the development of something else like the EPC for RFID chips, the point that Kuo made, and we're starting to see people talk about a TNS, a thing naming system. Because we're going to, if we're going to, the consequences of that, if we're going to keep domain names in the mix, they obviously don't need to be human readable. They can be strings of letters, strings of numbers. But it leads to then the policy questions about which registry are they going to come from, and it leads to questions like, are you going to have to pay ICANN 20 cents or 25 cents a name for the trillions of domain names that would need to be used in relation to each of those devices? So what's the role of domain names inside an IoT? Thanks.
Okay, can you give like a 1-minute answer or shorter?
So my first reaction, of course, is that you may need identifiers for these devices just to manage them, to register them and so on, and to move them from one authority to another. And domain names are a perfectly reasonable way to do that. They don't have to be memorable in the same sense that we think of domain names that we were trying to recall. One thing which is likely to be different is that if these devices are either mobile or portable, the binding of the identifier to its IP address may be more dynamic than the sorts of things that have fixed location, and that may be a challenge.
The other importance is the uniqueness in the global space. I mean, every single IoT system using local naming or local ID management. So we have to ask them, we have to teach them. We have to use global unique ID. That is not related with a human readable ID, basically.
Basically, right now, the problem is that, for example, RFID at DNS, it's not many people recognize that. But there is right now, the loose service running by VeriSign. And how to lay out, nobody really came out.
Thank you. Okay, sorry, I can't get this other one to work. Maybe you can get it to work while I'm. Okay, you had your next. You were the third hand I saw. Please. Try to keep it.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Myself is R.M. Agarwal from Department of Telecommunications, Government of India. Basically, Government of India is doing a lot of work in M2M policy formulation. So we have formed up so many issues, and we are going to form some policies on these things. But basically, this is the workshop, conference on this collaborative approach. So we find that until and unless there is collaborative governmental approach for the M2M manufacturing and M2M proliferation, these things cannot take place worldwide. So my question to the panel is how we are going to sort out the issues on, suppose if devices of M2M take import from one place to the other one, and how this how these issues will be resolved. Number two, in case, as you said, numbering should be unique. So like our mobile numbering scheme, like our PSTN numbering schemes, what we are going to do in the M2M devices numbering schemes. So, and of course, standards wise, already things are going on by one M2M alliance. So numbering wise, numbering plan wise, and transferability of the SIM systems, ownership of the SIM cards. Suppose I am having a car from the Europe, I am having the device from other country. So how this SIM will be regulated? And as India is going to have more than 100 smart cities, more than 15 billion smart grids and smart meters. So such type of issues will be emerging once these are scaled up. So how we are going to have a collaborative approach among the different governmental bodies? That is the issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Would someone like to give a quick answer? Thank you.
This is Ram. I don't think the answer is solely with governmental bodies. I think the first order of work to be done here is to think about interoperability and the standards for interoperability. Until those exist, adding regulation isn't really going to do much. Once devices actually understand how to talk to each other, and then I think you can start to think about what the policy frameworks and the regulatory frameworks ought to be.
Oh, you're not even speaking through a microphone. I'm so sorry.
So thank you. Thank you.
Basically, what you are pointing out is already well understood and it's been taken care of by others.
Microsoft.
Why doesn't he mic touch?
Sorry. You very rightly pointed out is interoperability and the standards are the very vital issues, and those things we are taking care of, as well as numbering plan also in line with the one M2M alliance. So the only issue is of course these things are going on simultaneously. These things we are taking care of, but at the same time the collaborative approach to the different government systems, like we did in the case of the mobile and PSTN systems. The numbering plan, as Mr. Hiroshi pointed out, unique numbering system should be there, and the roaming approach. So that we should have the collaborative approach among the different service providers also, M2M service providers also. So I think we need to have the one M2M forum, like this internet governance forum. We need to have the in future M2M governance forum, so that all the things can take place and things may go in a long way. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next was there. Yes, please.
Could I make a brief response? A brief response to that. I think you actually do need to get back to your own consumer law. I mean, while certainly for some classes of device there are strong rules in place, but until we get to a more mature set of systems where we can classify groups of devices and perhaps have clear arrangements in place for both those devices and the higher order services for them, you have to rely on your own basic consumer law. And I would really reinforce to you that you need to have that, and it needs to be strong and it needs to be effective within your country.
Thank you. Moving on.
So Alexander Klimberg, Harvard. I'm a security guy, so I worry about a lot of things, and I worry about an army of toasters attacking the Pentagon, but I think I should be more worried about global unique identifiers, especially when they're fixed. So my question to the panel is, within the present context of IPv6, you're of course aware that MAC address does of course contribute to IPv6 generation, even stateless auto-configuration mode. So my question is, even though it's only a partial contribution to the IPv6 address, are you all suitably reassured that anonymity is still guaranteed for the individual even under the current situation, given the fact that we know that it is possible to de-randomize numbers relatively easily these days?
Anyone want to take that one? No? I mean, we can move on and you can come back to it later. Okay, I was trying to do that before, but then you guys wanted to jump in quickly, so I changed my mode. But I'm willing to go back to letting them talk. Please pass the microphone over. No, beside. Oh, okay, you've got it.
Okay, thank you, Turhan Muluk, Intel Turkey. I would like to learn about the importance of IP version 6 protocol for the Internet of Things. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now let's get one more question in. I've got a hand right there.
So on the Robert Pepper at Cisco. So on the standards questions, one of the issues that we see are all of these various verticals. You have smart manufacturing, smart grid, you've got transportation, you've got supply chain. They're all working sort of separately. They're all migrating to IP with v6, but the interoperability, is not there yet. So this is one of the standards questions for interoperability across verticals and bringing them together. Earlier at a session, I suggested IETF actually, by the way, the latest IETF meeting, there were people from all these various sectors there. This is not just an ICT industry issue. We should recognize that, A. B, there's going to be a wide diversity of devices with a wide diversity of requirements. There are going to be all kinds of devices that will have no compute power or user interface. And those devices actually are going to be the ones that are going to be in the billions faster in terms of the machine-to-machine deployment, whether it's in smart cars, transportation, it's going to be embedded, for environmental sensing, it's going to be, automated irrigation in fields, et cetera. And the question, is the spectrum requirements for the diversity of devices with diversity of requirements, as well as the interoperability across all of the various verticals.
Thank you. Okay, so if we want to get a couple people to answer that, and in the meantime, could you bring the microphone down to this area, because I've had a couple hands that have been going up a lot lately. So please, who would like to take, okay, starting at that end, so Hiroshi, please.
Yeah, regarding the IP version 6 as well as interoperability among the different separated system, with my understanding, why the internet is successful was we defined the gateway. The Cisco provided multi-protocol gateway, allowing the subsystem doesn't care about which protocol it's going to apply. Then the backend system from the gateway using the same protocol, same address, transparent network. Then eventually the local network going to use TCP/IP and IP. That is exactly we are going to have. So once we share the data, when we share the backend system among the different industry segment first, then we may allow to use proprietary system at the beginning. So they naturally go to the same protocol in the future.
Thank you. It's wonderful to hear that. I started my career writing gateways and multi-protocol routers at Proteon. But anyway, so anyone else wanted to answer that one?
I wanted to respond to a couple of things on the security question about de-randomization. I think it's a valid issue. If you're looking for guarantees, I mean, this is security. There's no such thing. But I'd like to also bring up another thing. We're talking about ephemeral device binding to addresses, things that bind and then unbind and move on. With that, we're going to see, I think, changes in how the protocols actually work and interconnect with each other. And there is work to be done there.
Thank you. Yes, Nara.
I also wanted to get to that MAC address question a bit. At this point in time in the rollout of IPv6, there isn't really a strong standardisation in the way the ISPs are doing IPv6. So in some cases they're using MAC address binding in order to allocate IP addresses, and in other places they're not. And until we again get some sort of maturity there and you know, a more of a strong sense of best practice, then I don't think it's of huge concern to consumers. And the other part of that MAC address issue is that, I mean, by all means correct me or attack me, that's fine. But the other thing that we've seen too in MAC address deployment is a lot of the manufacturers don't seem to understand what they're for either. We've seen a huge amount of reuse of MAC addresses, and you can indeed get software to change your MAC address. So what we originally thought of, you know, as an engineer, what we originally thought of as being a really unique identifier, and that this was a good thing, this was a great thing, that went years ago because the folks just didn't know what to do with it and they didn't abide by that. So that again gets back to standards and adherence to standards well. Mm.
Yes, Vint, I see your finger on the button. Yes.
Could I also get into the queue in addition to trying to respond to this?
Why don't you take it now since you're already on the mic?
Okay. Okay, thank you for that. I want to point out that unless we have a set of agreements about the properties that we want these devices to exhibit, this is a policy question, we won't be able to say very much about interoperability. I hate the idea of gateways because, you know, it's just another damn box that you have to configure and, you know, could fail. But I understand as a pragmatic point, a lot of people are using different protocols to control all these devices. Here are some things that did not come up in this conversation so far. One of them is safety. We talked about security, but I think safety is going to be even more important. You don't want devices that turn out to put you at risk. Physical risk, potentially. So that's one point. The second thing is that wearables have the property that they are both mobile and portable. And so the more we see wearable devices around, there you go, there's one of them. And I'm not wearing my Google Glass right now because I loaned it to one of my engineers and he's doing something with it. But, you know, those are coming. And so we have to factor that into our architectural design. The last point I wanted to remind you about is liability and what obligations the manufacturers of these things might have. It gets a little scary. I think about this with the Google self-driving car. The first time there's an accident, who is liable? Is it the programmer? You know, is it the company? Is it something else? I think that the machine-to-machine communication and internet-enabled machines will invoke some of that issue as well.
Thank you. Okay, we want to go back down to the room here. And okay, yes, and I've got one, and then you'll be after. Okay. So, thank you.
Okay. First thing, I mean, I just
introduce yourself.
David Cake, Electronic Frontiers Australia. First, I'd like to sort of respond to the Peter's point about how does this fit in with the DNS. I think it's very important and often forgotten that the DNS provides a wonderful kind of abstraction mechanism that we can use for many other purposes. It's not just to, we often think of it's to turn human readable names into machine readable numbers, but there's an enormous potential for all sorts of abstraction mechanisms that we use there for very many practical purposes. So the DNS has a lot of good reason to be there, and we'll find many reasons for it, even if the name on the end of the string looks like But the question really, and I mean it touches on things that what Vint just said and what Ram said earlier is, so we have, I looked earlier, there were, in the year, there was a security incident where they had broken into a company's network via a security flaw in their LAFX internet-enabled light globes. And it sort of really, I mean, that one thing really brings the point. It's not just that there will be flaws, but as Ram said, we need to not just configure them, but actually update software. And that is an enormous, horrible problem, but that one that we absolutely have to solve. And I really sort of see here that we have on the one hand the sort of, way we think about operating systems for computers is that, oh, these are very important things and that we need to have service agreements and we need to keep them updated, and the manufacturers must absolutely have mechanisms to push out security. And the way we tend to think about operating systems for like embedded devices is, you know, well, maybe the manufacturer might put out an update, but usually it's whatever version of, you know, they've cobbled together with whatever version of Linux they have around at the time. And if they need to update it 2 years on, well, actually the engineers have been moved on from that project and we've shifted out, you know, we've moved on to the next version, and manufacturing, we do not do this. How do we ensure that we shift manufacturing of these smart devices from this model of, oh, it's just, you know, it's the functionality you bought it, to, no, we have to absolutely have mechanisms to update the operating systems, to patch operating systems of millions, billions of devices. That seems to me to be a big problem. What do we, where do we start?
Thank you. Please.
Thank you. My name is Arda Gerkens. I'm a member of the Dutch Senate. I'm very happy to hear that the consumer rights are addressed. I didn't hear anything about the ethical question, and maybe if somebody wants to tell if there's an update, the ethical question, the ethics. At this moment, consumers are not actually involved with the process. We heard this morning as well during the session there. And it might very possibly be that we need different consumer rights because we're entering a completely new world. Many aspects of the points that you all addressed are issues for consumers as well. I think, coming also to your question, what do we need to do more? It would be favorable if we had some kind of platform for interaction with consumers so they can be involved with the process and think along the way things are happening. Thank you.
That's a wonderful suggestion for moving forward. I can only take like 1 or 2 more questions.
Ari, may I quickly respond to?
Yeah, please. And so I had.
Just as a quick response to your ethical question, the EU Commission or the expert group took the ethical question up in the second round. In fact, at the beginning it was not on the table, but it came up, and there are studies on ethical questions, and there is some research in this field. I could give you some further information bilaterally.
Thanks. Then a quick answer from here, then 1 and 2 last comments, and then we'll go to time.
Professor Türksel Kayabenskier, member of United Nations, SEPA. And I think that's a very important issue, ethical side, but also I ask myself, how about the human beings? Do really human beings need all those things? And are they ready emotionally, psychologically? And in the new world we are building up, and we should ask many questions. So I don't want to take time. Thank you.
Now, those are good questions, but are human beings ever ready emotionally? Would be my question. Okay, you had one.
Sandra Hofrichter from the Eurodic, and also participating in this dynamic coalition for a while. It's funny, I'd like to catch up with the things the 2 ladies before said, and maybe we should reconsider that there are lots of men talking about implementation, technology, chances, and the ladies are somehow the ones who are raising the concerns. And my concern actually is, although I'm a fan of new technologies and try to use as much as possible, how much of autonomy of our basic human abilities we are going to give to machines in the future. I mean, things like open the window when the air is too humid, regulating the heating when it's getting too warm, darken the light, all these things. If we are giving them to machine, I fear at one point we won't be able to have a feeling, a sense of when we need to open the window, when we need to regulate the heating, when we need to darken the light. And I mean, such developments, they did happen in the past as well. At the moment when people decided not to shoot their animals by themselves and prepare them, but going to the butcher and buy them there. I mean, so we gave away already some kind of ability to serve our basic needs. And in the future, I think this could be extended. And this very small example for this development is that how many, or can you even remember the phone numbers of your father, sisters, brothers, husbands? I can't. Because I'm using that mobile phone and everything is in there. I'm depending on that quite a lot. And I think we should always, and the technicians, the engineers should always at least consider that if somebody who is choosing to go the old-fashioned way should be still able to buy a refrigerator who is not able to attract the Bank of America. And I think this I have the fear that this is not going to happen.
Thank you. And I want to get one last.
It was a quick. It was a quick.
One last answer.
Thank you very much. My name is Mikhail Komarov from Russia, from Moscow, from National Research University, Higher School of Economics. Actually, I would like to continue with the safety, because the thing is that when we have smart devices, we have sensors, right? So they have they generate data, and how we can be sure, how we can guarantee that they generate proper data, how we can guarantee that it's reliable data. And when we are talking about machine-to-machine communications, so obviously we should be, we should ensure that machines receive proper data. Otherwise, we can have toasters, doing something bad, or heating system. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so I'd like to give people on the participants on the dais, the committed contributors. I can't wait to become a committed contributor with an opinion, because I got so many I've kept to myself. So please, who would like to, you wanted to comment on one thing.
A quip I wanted to make. I think you were asking for the right to turn it off. So instead of the right to be forgotten, we evolved to the right to turn it off. And perhaps that's not such a bad thing. And I think in this context too, the gentleman here was mentioning things about unreliability of this data. Well, perhaps we should just live with the fact that this data will often be inherently unreliable because of the computation size and capacity of these little devices. They really can't do that much that's really that great, perhaps. And another point that David raised back here was about requirements for updates and things. I think that the model is fundamentally wrong in a lot of our consumer devices. And I mentioned this earlier, the incentive is wrong. The incentive within this market is that you just sell more. So if it doesn't do what people expect, then you just buy another one, or you take that one and you throw it away. This whole disposability concept means that the incentives for manufacturers to provide updates are not there. They want you to buy a new one. They don't want you to fix the old one. They want you to buy a new one. And that just does not lead to the right to a healthy environment.
Okay, thank you. Who else would like to make a comment, please?
Regarding the guarantee, the government want to control the guarantee quality, then love making a regulation, right? Though the regulation doesn't work in a case of uncertain environment, right? So that is the reason why the Vint using liability, I believe. Liability means try to best effort in order to compensate some such kind of thing. Then providing the best effort quality of function based on our best knowledge. So that is same as the ethics problem as well. Always the government want to making a rule regulation in order to protect end users. That's not true. The thing we have to do is we have to provide the opportunity or rights or capability the end user be able to control, be able to see what's going on in the system, backend system. That is what we have to provide. That is the reason why we always forwarding the open system, providing a transparency, the thing. I'm sorry, for example, we making a strong fight with the government about smart meter issue. Smart meter was installed by the utility company. Utility company tried to get in those information by themselves. So we asking them, and the user has a right to read the data, to use the data. So the user has a right to be able to collect and use the data. That is yet another important thing.
Thank you. I had Ram, you wanted to comment, and then I had Hossein wanted to comment.
Thank you. Three things that I wanted to say. Narelle just talked about the what I call the Kleenex model for devices, disposable model. But underlying this is that a sustainable recycling model doesn't really exist, and manufacturers of devices ought to start thinking about a sustainable recycling method. That, in many ways, might be a start of a solution for the software update and the embedded systems problem, and there might be economic incentives for that. Down the road, I expect also to see potentially a market exchange for used MAC addresses or reusable MAC addresses, and there's a security vector there as well. And finally, if manufacturers of these devices don't exercise care, we can see a future where there'll be a global market for used devices that can be repurposed to bring new security threats to the front. Devices that appear to be trustworthy, but actually it's really more than just a Trojan horse. We're talking about Trojan mites.
I like that. Okay, I had Hussein and then Kuwait.
Very much, very rich discussion. I mean, just wanted to summarize in 3 points some of the issues that were iterated. As we see IoT starting to go into early maturity phases, what we have seen before, as Pepper mentioned, that verticals starting to standardize themselves, coming up with standards focused on these particular, or optimize these particular verticals, like transportation, like health, like automotive industry. I think now it's very important that for global adoption of IoT, both developed world and developing countries, that these come to a consensus or a place of where they can come together. Verticals among inside the vertical or verticals together. And hopefully the IETF will be the place for this takes place, because for broad adoption and manufacturing of IoT and machine-machine communication, global standards are needed. Not only vertical standards, but global standards are needed. So really this is a good news that's happening, and I think this is a direction that we should support through the IETF. On reliability, yes, I certainly hear the concern, and I also accept the comment from my fellow panelists. But from a data analytics perspective, there are methods to capture or identify the noise in the data that you collect. So in a central location where you are in the position of making a decision based on data that you receive, you go through a process of data cleaning. Identify what data is really flaws, and use data that's more reliable to make up your decision. Last point, we shouldn't forget about the use of machine-to-machine and IoT for emerging economies. Not only, as I mentioned at the beginning of the speech, not only to better the standard of living for humans, but basically being able or help them to live and support their daily and the necessities in terms of reducing subsidies, availability of food, availability of water for irrigation and drinking.
Thank you. Kuwait?
Yeah, I think today we actually talking about two different lines, and we are trying to think about the mechanism how to intercommunication between these two lines. One line is from idea to the innovation, to the development, to implementation, to the markets. And then we have another line, we are talking about safety, security, ethic, liability, whatever. Now I think the community, we need to think about in which stage, in what area we are thinking about the ethic, we are thinking about liability issue. So I think we should build up the mechanism for the community, thinking about how to communicate between the development life cycle and the security, ethic, whatever, liability issue. I think that might be a fundamental, we have to think about it.
Thank you. We're just about running out of time. I made my next to the last chair's decision, letting the conversation run longer. I don't expect we're going to complete any of the discussions today. Did any of the other panelists have a last word that they needed to say? Two last words. Okay.
One is to remember that remote diagnosis may be very important to help a user of these devices figure out what's not working. And the second thing is to think about building to machine communication. In other words, you walk in and the device learns something from the place that it's in. And we can take advantage of things like that to make better emergency services. Your mobile goes into a hotel room and there's a problem. When it calls the emergency service, it says, and by the way, I'm in this room number in this hotel, here's the temperature, and the customer has fallen on the floor. We have an opportunity to use this new technology to make our lives a lot better.
Thank you. Okay, and Rolf and then Martin. Although you'll have lots of chance to talk after this is over. You'll have a whole year to talk.
A very short response to the two ladies' questions. Technologies are inevitably going to grow and to evolve over time, so representatives of social sciences have to see to it that they can accompany technology.
Thank you. So Martin, and then I wanted to give a word also to Wolfgang, and then I wanted to do the business that we have to finish.
Good. Well, just amazed by all the good points that have been coming to bear. Rudolf from OECD had a session this morning and some good points came there up. And this was really good, and I think a lot of material, and I'm sure you'll wrap up later to combine that, right, Wolfgang? A lot of input to what we can take forward. One thing that then as the last thought, particularly for the lawyers or the politicians amongst us, the fact that we don't have law that is built for what we're building in a way means that we cannot hide behind it. And as a manufacturer, as a service provider, we keep to have a responsibility which is not limited to one country or one jurisdiction if we want to be global. So we will need to set our own ethical standards, and we will need to be responsible and transparent, showing that we are caring and doing that. Because the other thing, the internet, where people communicate, also adds to transparency. If you fuck up in one country, the whole world will know.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Wolfgang Kleinwächter. We founded 7 years ago this dynamic coalition on the Internet of Things, and I think this is a good example why the Internet Governance Forum is a great place, that you can identify at an early time an issue and stimulate discussion across silos where stakeholders are sitting. I think this is a really a wonderful opportunity that technical people talk to lawyers, talk to civil society people, that governments are here, that we have the business people here. This is a unique setting, and we should make use out of this, and we should continue with this dynamic coalition on the Internet of Things. And I'm also very happy that the OECD had this workshop this morning, and they are certainly invited to join this dynamic coalition, and we will talk about the plan for the future just immediately after this meeting is closed. So I cannot give a summary from the debate, but as an academic, if I would put this into a SWOT analysis, then I would say the strength of the Internet of Things is that we can do things which were unimaginable years before. The weakness is that we have only little knowledge about the unintended side effects. The opportunity is that we have new business chances and we can make our life easier, better organized and cheaper. But the threat is that we will lose our privacy, and we can lose control over our own life, and we have to take this into consideration. This would be my SWOT result. Thank you.
Thank you, Wolfgang, and thank you to the committed contributors that often go understood as panelists, but thank you so much. I want to quickly, no, we're not quite over. It's a dynamic coalition, so we have a little, now I had said we would talk about where go further. We don't have much time to do that, but I wanted to say 3 things. One is at the Eurodig, when we had a meeting, one of our intermediate meetings, I committed to create, or not to create, but to take a wiki that had been created for us and populate it. I never got around to it. And I carry, as I leave being chair of the coalition, I will continue to carry that obligation, so I will work on it, and then there'll be a chair to act. See, there wasn't a chair to beat me up for not doing it. The chair kept giving me permission to not do it. So, but I'll have a chair that'll actually make me work, I expect. He could try. I thought your idea was wonderful of, within the context of that wiki or some other thing, find a way to reach out and get more people, users, consumers, whatever, involved and bring them into the discussion so that we start getting those. So I think that was a great idea. So I'll look to keeping that. The other thing we've got is we have a paper that needs further work. That'll be online, and it's something that I'll set up so that people can comment on it further and see where we want to go with that. We have an email list. You can find it on the Dynamic Coalition webpage that the IGF keeps. So I encourage all of you to get involved, and we can continue the discussion about the work we need to do. The Dynamic Coalition really does attempt to keep working. There'll probably be 1 or 2 opportunities during the year to have a coalition, a Dynamic Coalition meeting. I haven't the faintest idea at the moment where they are or when they'll be. You know, that'll come. Now, the last thing I needed to do was to divest myself of the chair of the Dynamic Coalition. Wolfgang passed it to me about 2 years ago, and we have no process for electing. And what we've sort of formed as a tradition, and if we do it now, it will become a tradition, because doing it once doesn't really make a tradition, doing it twice might, is that as the chair, I sort of request someone else to please take it away from me, and we ask the assembled coalition whether they object. So I have been begging Martin to take this away from me, and he did most of the work of organizing this. So I would like to ask, is there any objection to me handing the chair over to Martin for the next year? So in closing, as no longer the chair, thank you. It's yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I'm honored and a little bit worried about the coming year, but I do look forward to bringing this further, because I truly believe that this subject gives us an edge on what needs to happen in preparing for the Internet of the future that we care about. So my condition for not saying immediately no was that I asked my fellow contributors to continue to contribute, and they promised to do so as well. Now, if you haven't been on the list yet and you don't know how to get on the list, you can also drop your business card here, and we'll make sure you'll be informed of the activities between the IGFs, so you don't have to wait for next IGF to act on this. Now, for sure, the paper will be there. For sure, we'll have a kind of summary of what happened here today, as we have from Eurodic, our event at Eurodic as well. And you have access to it, and we look forward to your feedback. And this is not something that we are doing for the world. This is what we can do with the world to bring it further. So thank you very much. We have 18 seconds left, so we're early. With this, it's a pleasure to close this meeting. And thank you for your active participation. Thank you for your contributions, committed contributors. And thank you, Avery, for chairing it up to this point. Well,